Continue. The Ethiopians' need. Verse 30. And Philip ran thither to him and heard him read the prophet Isaiah and said, Understandest, understandest thou what thou readest? Basically asking him, do he understand what he's reading? Verse 31. He said, How can I, except some man should guide me? And he desired Philip that he would come up and sit with him. Verse 32. The place of the scripture which he read was this: He was led as a sheep to the slaughter, and like a lamb dumb before his shearer, Salakia shearer, so opened he not his mouth. Which is in the book of Isaiah 53 and 7, which I'm going to get real quick, which is talking about YAHAWASHI. When you go into Isaiah 53, that chapter is speaking about YAHAWASHI. 53, 7 and 8. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is dumb. So he opened not his mouth. Verse 8. And he was taken from prison and from judgment. And who shall declare his generations? For he was cut off of Salakia, cut off out of the land of the living for the Salakia, for the transgressions of my people was he stricken. Verse 33, back into the Bible expositor, Acts 8 and 34, Salakia, Acts 8 and 33. In his humiliation, his judgment was taken away, and who shall declare his generation? For his life is taken from the earth. Verse 34. And the eunuch answered Philip and said, I pray thee, of whom speaketh the prophet this, of himself or of some other man? The desire for understanding. Acts 8 and 30. Salakia, Acts 8, verse 30 and 31. As Philip ran up alongside the chariot, he heard him read the prophet Isaiah. And that day it was a common practice to read aloud, not silently as we do. So Philip immediately knew both what the Ethiopian was doing and what his text was. As a biblically literate Jew, Philip recognized the passage and as an informed, he knew Salakia, and as an apostle, he knew its messianic fulfillment in Mashiach. He therefore asked the eunuch, Understandest thou what thou readest? The Greek construction of Philip's question implies a negative answer. You do not understand what you are reading, do you? He was correcting his supposition. It was not sufficient that the eunuch have a copy of Isaiah. It was not even enough that he be able to read its words. It still remained a closed book to him, which is like how this truth is, you know what I mean? Like, especially, I mean, even when brothers ain't even speaking in the Hebrew, it's like, you know, that's what makes this truth special, you know what I mean? You know, I always found it amazing, you know, all those different, those, the Ishmaelites and the Elamites and, it's all, even, not Issachar, but Ephraim, you know what I mean? Everybody would go into their own little language, and then when the Akim, we go into speaking the Hebrew, people look at us like it's crazy, but look at us like we're crazy. But like I said, even when we're not even speaking in Hebrew, when we just discussing scriptures, people look at us like we're crazy. So I could relate to this chapter, this paragraph. It is a message of his high official humility and spiritual hunger that he was not offended by Philip's question. He admitted his frustration. How could he comprehend it without someone to explain it to him? Apparently recognizing Philip as a Jew, the man invited him up into the chariot to ride with him a while. Thus, Yahawah, by Yashem Yahushua, had provided for him both his soul-saving message and a spirit-led interpreter to explain it. And they cite in Romans 10, verse 13 and 15, verse 13 through 15. Our passage confirms the truth that we cannot fully understand the import of the Old Testament without proper interpretation. Put simply, the key to that interpretation is Yahawashi Mashiach. He himself asserted that the scriptures pointed to him, his deeds. Luke 4, verses 16 and 21. His teachings, John 5, verse 39 and 46, and especially his death and resurrection, Matthew 26, verse 24, verse 53 through 56, Luke 24, verse 25 to 27, verse 44 through 47. The apostles picked up the same theme, and their preaching was filled with Old Testament allusions. The perplexing passage, Acts 8, verse 32 to 33. The passage the Ethiopian was reading was Isaiah 53, a clearly Masonic prophecy. It speaks of the servant of Yahweh suffering, often humiliation and death, but it was confusing to this partially taught proselyte. The Isaiah verses cited, verses 7 and 8, describe an innocent sufferer who's unjustly accused, humiliated, and killed. And though it all, and Slakia, and through it all, he does not resist and never opens his mouth in his own defense. It is a striking and troubling spectacle. The Judaism to which the eunuch had been converted had no unified view on the interpretation of Isaiah 53. Like I said, in my spirit, I feel, like I said, that's the spirit. Like I said, just last camp, we had a, somebody that was listening. It was a female, the female of Jake, and she was agreeing. Her spirit was agreeing with what brothers were speaking on, and then, some kind of way they got into Ham and, the Egyptians and, Philistines and Canaanites and all that, and, she, some kind of way we got into Ethiopia, and she was saying how, something about Ethiopia, and, the head of the camp, or one of the heads of the camp had to, not check her, because she got to thinking she knew something. He explained to her, like, we already knew that, we had people over, you still got Israelites over in Ethiopia, we got people over there, because like I said, Israel is like the sand of the sea, so, but, so in my spirit, I believe that he was sent to go speak to this Ethiopian because he was an Israelite. And through it, the typical view was the servant of Yahweh, and Isaiah referred to Israel. There were some hints that it may have referred to the Messiah, but to most Jews of the time, the idea that the Messiah should suffer and die was unthinkable. So the Ethiopian's confusion may reflect the confusion within Judaism as a whole. That's deep. Like I said, I've never talked to anybody about that. Like I said, I'm reading out this expositor. But like I said, we all know that Isaiah 53 is talking about the Messiah, but he's saying at that time, which could make some sense because, like I said, even the apostles didn't really understand that he was talking about his death. You know what I mean? YAHAWASHI, however, clearly understood that suffering and death must precede his Messianic glorification. Matthew 20 and 28. And Mark 10 and 45. YAHAWASHI's apostles and New Testament writers also saw clearly that Isaiah's suffering servant was YAHAWASHI. John 12, verses 37 and 41. Romans 10 and 16. 1 Peter 2 and 21 through 25. Indeed, his suffering, death, and resurrection made up the heart of the early church's preaching. Acts 2, verses 22 to 36. The pivotal question, Acts 8 and 34. Just returning from Jerusalem, the Ethiopian may well have encountered the Christian. They keep using the word Christian. It's the Bible expositor, so I like to put the Israelite message while there. But if so, he had not connected it with the passage he was reading. His question seems to have been prompted rather by current discussion within Judaism. He asked, I pray thee, of whom speaketh the prophet this, of himself or some other man? Prophets did often suffer unjustly, but how could Isaiah possibly fulfill the entire passage? Here's an amazing example of Yahawah by YAHAWASHI's sovereignty. He had led Philip to this exact spot at this exact time and instructed him to join this particular man. Meanwhile, he had directed the Ethiopian to travel this road and to read this passage of scripture at this time. Thus, Yahawah by YAHAWASHI had connected a man who had a burning question with a man who had the right answer. And that's how, the Most High Yahawah and his son, YAHAWASHI, that's how this works, you know what I mean? Like, not to divert from the topic, but, like, it just made me think about, like, I'm sure brothers could come up with testimonies about that, you know what I mean? Like, it just be seeming like when, he tests you and then you get to a certain point and then boom, like, it just be like too perfectly set up, you know what I mean? Like, I remember when I was going through my testimony, man, I'm dealing with demons and didn't really understand what I was dealing with, so Most High sent somebody to guide me to a certain point, you know what I'm saying? And then And that's when I really came into the truth. You know what I'm saying? And if I would have stayed, up, following this person's coattails, I'd be all fucked up right now. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, the Most High, what is that scripture that says? He will always make a way for you to escape. You know what I mean? He won't let you suffer more than you can bear. What's that? Second Corinthians. I think it's Second Corinthians 10 and 2 Corinthians 10 and something. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Um, Continue.